Hello, all you patrons. Here we are again with another pre-show. Gather round.
Gather round indeed. Still in their summer clothes. Look at that. They're still wearing them.
That's right.
Because it's still summer.
Yes, that's right. When does summer officially end?
Well, for me, and as they say, meteorologically, I think it is, or maybe it's the other, by the calendar, it's the 1st of September. But meteorologists or goody two-shoes or somebody, they like to have it end at the autumn equinox.
When is that?
Well, the autumn equinox is toward Halloween.
Isn't the equinox a
No,
pagan
I'm sorry,
thing?
it's September. My mistake.
Oh, okay. Isn't it a pagan thing? Summer solstice and winter solstice and these equinoxes.
Okay. The sky is a pagan thing. How about the Earth Mother? How about the sea? How about water? How about food? Ooh, pagans!
Yeah, the sun. They have that sun symbol.
Exactly, and the moon.
That's right.
Yeah, everything's pagan. I can't take it. I was told not to slap my knees last time. I was. What's the word? I was. You know the word. Reprimanded.
Yeah, you're reprimanded.
I was told bad touch.
Bad touch. Yeah, and knee slapping hurts the delicate ears.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Forgive me. I didn't mean to be bad. I'll be good. I promise. Or not.
Yeah, we've been real good before this episode. A couple donuts, hogging.
Oh man, we dropped by the Peacock Donuts. We got 2 glazed apiece, ladies and gentlemen. 2.
Yeah.
And you know what that means? We're on a sugar high. It's a little bit like, when your brother has you take the kids for the afternoon, and then you stop by See's Candies on the way home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and deliver them.
Yeah.
And not that I would do that, of course, ladies and gentlemen.
So, what's new?
What's new indeed? Well, several things are new. Yesterday was, as you know, August 2nd. It was the feast of St. Alphonsus Liguori, but it was also Worldwide Anglo-Indian Day.
What?
Worldwide Anglo-Indian Day.
What is that?
See, ladies and gentlemen, this is what they don't teach in school. Oh, I'm sorry. I slapped my knees again. Never mind. Anyway, well, you know what Anglo-Indians are.
I mean, on the surface, it's people who are white and Indian?
Mixed English and Indian.
Yeah.
People like Cliff Richards, young ones, darling with the young
Oh,
ones.
yeah, okay.
He's Anglo-Indian.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, and there are a lot of others. Merle Oberon was Anglo-Indian, I think. Anyway, but although many of them have left their native lands of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, many more remain. And but those who have emigrated to Britain, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and generally, whether at home or in the diaspora, retain their very interesting customs. A lot of them are Catholic. They're one of the major Catholic communities in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. And of course, they're sort of akin to the Burghers in Ceylon or Sri Lanka, the Eurasians of Malaysia and Indonesia. These are all similar groups in that they're on the one hand, DNA-wise, they're the children of both the colonials and the locals. And culture-wise, they're generally, as it were, outposts of European/Christian culture in whatever country they're in. So they're really a great people, and in their homelands, they labor under a lot of difficulty. So give a thought to the Anglo-Indians and their allied peoples in the Indies, because these are folk that don't get much of a break at home, nor are they thought of much by the foreigner.
This is a super random question. Are people who are with the last name D'Souza related to these people? The Souzas?
Well, there's an interesting question. Remember I
Yeah.
said the Anglo-Indians are one of the Catholic communities?
Yeah.
Well, the Indo-Portuguese, there's a word for you. De Souzas tend to be of that group, if they're Indian.
Yeah.
But, there are a lot of groups within the Goans, the Mangalorians, etc. And De Souza is actually a last name you will find amongst them all.
Oh.
You'll find Burgers in Ceylon. You'll find Indos in Indonesia, as they call them. The Van Halens are also Indos.
The band?
No, not the whole band, just the brothers.
Oh, okay.
The other
Eddie and Alex. Okay.
Eddie and Alex Van Halen are Indos. They're when I met Eddie 1,000 years ago, I don't remember it, but when they were garage band of the West Valley, I said, "Oh, Van Halen, you're Dutch." I said, "Well, via Indonesia." I said, "Oh, Dutch East Indies, Indos, haha." He goes, "Yeah, you're the first person I've ever met who knew that, who wasn't one of the community."
You talked to Eddie Van Halen, and then that was the nature of your discussion?
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. That's so on brand for you.
This is a party in Granada Hills in, I don't know, 79 or 78 or something, 77. A long time ago.
So they didn't get big quite yet.
No, they weren't. No,
they were in high school or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were a garage band. They played all over the West Valley.
Wow. Did you see, was David Lee Roth there? Was he attached?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was never a fan.
No, I know. I figured.
I mean, they were there and I was there. And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It was like meeting Janis Joplin. You remember that story? So.
You met No, you didn't. You'd be way too young.
No, I was 8 years old. I was 7. There was at the soda fountain of the Rexall Drugs on Hollywood and Highland. It must have been about 68.
Oh, okay, what transpired?
Not much. I came in with a friend of mine from school, and not every day, but once or twice a week, we'd go up to the soda fountain at the Rexall. So we sat down, and this friend of mine was as much of a chatterbox as I was. But when this blonde lady was sitting next to me, she said, "You've got an interesting accent. Where are you from?" And I told her. We started talking and all that. My friend was silent as the grave, which was unlike him. So then she says, "Well, it's been nice talking, but I gotta go," and she leaves. So then my friend says to me, "Do you know who that was?" And I said, "No, I have no idea. Some blonde chick. I don't know." And he says, "She's a singer. My big brother has one of her records. Her name is Janis Joplin."
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, at 8 years old, I'm surprised you would know who Janis Joplin was.
I didn't. I had no idea who she was. But he did. And so when I got home, I told my brother, and he goes, "You met Janis Joplin?" I said, "Yeah. Spent enough time sitting at the soda fountain of the Rexall on Hollywood and Highland. You'll meet anybody, kid." It was the time. It was the 60s. Mistakes were made,
Oh.
I didn't have any cherry in my malted.
Interesting.
I didn't like cherries then. I don't like them now. You know the thing about those cherries? If you bury them and then dig them up 50 years later, they'll be just as fresh.
All right. Why is Russia a mostly white and Christian nation not considered to be a part of the West?
Well, there are reasons for that. Firstly, let me say I consider them part of the West for all that that's worth.
Okay.
Because they're a European nation, a Christian European nation. So as far as I'm concerned, they're as much a part of the West as the United States are.
Okay.
But having said that, there is a different thing about them, just as we're different because of our colonial experience. What makes Russians different, especially from Ukrainians and Belarusians, is being dominated by the Mongols, by the Tatars. It had huge effects on that culture. Now, see, you have three peoples, the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, and the Russians, all of whom claim descent from that entity called Kievan Rus.
Mm.
But what made them different after the fall of Kiev to the Mongols was who dominated them, which outsiders. So the Belarusians were dominated by the Lithuanians, the Ukrainians by the Poles, and the Russians by the Tartars, by the Mongols. And that is what made their cultures, after a very similar origin and period, it made them very different.
Mm.
And so it's basically it's the mark of the Tartar on Russian culture that differentiates them, the way the colonial experience differentiates us.
Mm.
And that being the case, it's left to you or to them to decide: are you European or are you something totally different?
Mm.
I would argue that if you're Christian, then and again, as we were just saying with the Anglo-Indians, they're a lot of them are better Europeans than Viking neo-pagans,
Right.
because Christianity, especially Catholicity, is an integral part of being European.
No.
So if you get rid of that, how European are you?
Hmm. What are your thoughts on Hong Xiquan and the Taiping Rebellion?
Well, poor old Hong was a little bit crazy. He had bought into, well, he had accepted Christianity to a degree, but he became unsettled and decided that he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, and that his mission was to free China of the Qing, the Qing dynasty, who were, as we remember, not Chinese. They were Manchus. And so, many men spoke, but Fu Manchu. Anyway, that was old and didn't need to be brought up again.
Right.
Many men smoke, but Fu Manchu.
Yeah, boomer humor. Oh!
He did a B word. I'm triggered. The only generation that grew old without ever growing up. That's why we pout when we get triggered. Anyway, seriously, the boomer humor. Oh gosh, boomer humor. God help us all. Anyway, so the Taipings were. They wanted to first overthrow the Qing and then drive out the Western foreigners. It's interesting that there was an American and a British general who were, because the Chinese imperial armies were smashed. So this American general, his name escapes me, and then Charles Gordon of Khartoum fame, who succeeded him, commanded what became known as the Ever Victorious Army, which was a reorganized Chinese imperial army that eventually was able to defeat the Taiping. But it was a bloody, bloody conflict. It was really, really awful. A lot of people died. Well, like is usually the case with civil wars. And then some of the refugees fled to Vietnam, where they became known as the Black Flag Pirates. And they were such a menace to European shipping that they gave the French the first reason to intervene into Indochina. So that was the lasting effect, in a sense, of the Taiping, was French Indochina.
All right, I have a probably short history question. What's the history of French Canada? You can just,
Short.
Yeah, it's pretty short, I mean, just kind of it's just like a blip in history, you know what I mean?
Oh, really?
And I don't know, if it's, how big of a deal it is.
God chose a people to be his vessel of perfection for North America. There, is that short enough for you?
There we go. Okay.
Is that short enough?
Wow.
However, there's another version of the history that's slightly longer. No, the French Canadians, in the 1530s, the first French explorer, Jacques Cartier, came to the St. Lawrence, claimed the land in the name of the king. But by the time Samuel de Champlain came in he first hit Nova Scotia about 1600. In 1606 and 7, he began exploring the St. Lawrence. 1608, he founds the city of Quebec. It was a very a very interesting thing that that by the time he came, the Indians that had been there when Cartier was there were all gone, and they had been displaced by Algonquins. So that's kind of an interesting thing that the whole population had altered in the 70 years that the French were gone, which tells you something about pre-Columbian America, that you could have an entire set of people completely pushed out without much of a memory of who they were or where they were sent.
Yeah.
We tend to forget that the wars between North American tribes are often genocidal. They spoke in terms of cutting off the next tribe, and that meant killing them all. So people forget that because, see, what it was, if you're a mental third grader, meaning you're a university professor, what it was is that everything was wonderful till the white man came, but then badness came in with Europeans, like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So, at any rate, the French missionaries began evangelizing the Indians. The fur trade brought the Frenchmen up and down the Mississippi and St. Lawrence valleys through the Great Lakes. A direct ancestor of mine, Jacques Desnoyers, was the first white man to see the Lake of the Woods in Minnesota. So they ranged pretty far. But they did not settle a lot. For one thing, it was hard to get Frenchmen to come over to Quebec. Like it was hard to get Spaniards and Portuguese to come to the New World. So they got whoever they could. They settled a regiment of troops, the Carignan-Salieres, in the 1600s. They settled down, those who didn't go back to France. And for wives, they sent over the filles du cachet, the casket girls, the filles du roi, the daughters of the king, who were orphans raised in royal orphanages. And actually, almost all of us French Canadians descend from either or both the Carignan-Salieres and the filles du roi. But we continued to grow ever so slowly, but what allowed French Canada to survive, the whole thing, were the Indian allies. And so, despite fighting 4 wars with the Anglos, we were able to defeat them sufficiently as not to be annexed until the last one. And in 1759, the French were defeated at the Plains of Abraham, and the British became the masters of the continent. Well, the new king, George III, when the French were signed over to him at the treaty, he swore to treat them as though they were his subjects born, which meant no penal laws. And that, of course, got into the Declaration of Independence. It was a big part of the revolutionary struggle, you might say. The Yankee rebels attacked Canada, were defeated. And almost the same thing would happen again in the War of 1812. So up until that time, there was no question of French loyalty to the British Crown. But in the 1830s, the Patriots, who were Republicans and inspired by liberal thinking from Europe, started a rebellion in Quebec. They had English-speaking partners in Ontario who did the same thing. They were defeated. And from that time on, Quebec became more and more, and the French Canadians in general, more and more conservative people. And they would be that way up until the Quiet Revolution of the 1960s. In the 1860s, a number of young French Canadian men went over to Rome to fight for the Pope, the Papal Zouaves. And these lads were a big part of the French Canadian identity, which at that time was very, very Catholic. A number of religious orders were founded there. The Sisters Adorers of the Precious Blood. There were a number of saints to come out of that part of the world, some of whom, like Venerable Mother Catherine Aurélie of the Sisters Adorers, were miracle workers. And then in the two world wars, there was some creative friction with the Anglo-Canadians and with the home government in London over conscription. They thought that surely the French Canadians would want to go fight for France, not realizing that at the time, the France of the French Canadian imagination was the France of the Revolution, and they had no desire to fight for it. So things were until the 1960s and the Quiet Revolution, where we, in the wake of Vatican II, we lost our faith and our minds, and have been pretty screwed up ever since. There you go.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I forgot to mention, a ton of us after the American Civil War came down to New England to work in the mills, and that is how the French Canadians of New England became established. Truly a wonderful people, just an extraordinarily nice set of people, really grand. I mean, tremendous folks, just marvelous people. The French Canadians of New England, or the Franco-Americans, as they were also called.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many experts agree that they're probably one of the most pleasant and easy to deal with people on the face of the earth.
Well, that makes sense that you would come across. I mean, it's your crowd, you know?
Well, I'm not saying it. Would you
saying.
believe that this was issued as a report by the Duvalier Institute in Lewiston, Maine?
No, I would not believe that.
Would you believe? Although I will say that one man who did kind of catch what the Franco-American had become was Stephen King.
Oh, how did he show that?
Well, in a short story he wrote called The Woman in the Room, it's set in Lewiston, and the protagonist turns on the radio, and he hears a song with French lyrics, and then the commentary is, Lewiston is still a French-speaking town, and they love their jigs and reels almost as much as they love to cut each other up in the bars on Lower Lisbon Street.
Okay. Wow.
Now, you know another Anglo who understood us very well?
Who?
It was Rudyard Kipling.
Okay.
He has a poem called The Song of the Cities, in which each of the major cities of the British Empire address Britain. But he writes for Quebec and Montreal, peace is our portion, yet a whisper arose, half in jest and half in hate. And we, remembering ancient blows and fearing no man, wait.
That is dead on. That's the best characterization I've ever heard of the French Canadians. That was a French.
Yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable. What an artist.
Half in jest and half in hate. We're nice people, basically, if you don't get to know us very closely.
Wow.
Kipling liked us, though. And you know why he liked us?
Why?
For the same reason Lovecraft did.
Why?
Because we remained ourselves. Despite all sorts of pressure and pushing around and all sorts of terrible stuff, we remained who we were.
You stayed authentic.
Yeah, we kept it real, man. Keeping it real. That's what I'm talking about, keeping it real. It's like Elizabeth Warren. Folks that haunt us. What?
Is she still doing things?
Yes, I'm sad to say.
Do we really have to invoke her name?
Yes, we do. She's big in the Kamala Harris campaign.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yet another reason to vote. You okay? You seem a little displeased.
Got a little nauseous suddenly. All right. What are your thoughts on Otto von Bismarck?
Not good. No, I really dislike Bismarck. He's one of my personal bête noire. Why, you ask?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. Firstly, because he was very much an opponent of the Habsburgs, and he was very anti-Catholic. So that's kind of enough to do it for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But more than that, he's often characterized as a conservative, but he wasn't. He was a liberal in the sense of being a capitalist, and he wanted basically to eject Austria with its backward-looking Catholicism from Germany. And he succeeded,
Hmm.
which is why instead of a revived empire with a Habsburg at the head, you had a truncated empire with a Hohenzollern. It's not one of my favorites. Plus, he was kind of a phony when it came to talking about monarchical solidarity.
Hmm.
With one of his mouths, he would talk about the need for France to regain its monarchy.
Yeah.
But he didn't really believe it because he wanted France to stay Republican and weak.
Hmm.
And when his ambassador to Paris, a fellow by the name of Harry von Arnim, started working with the French royalists, he got very upset, and attacked him for it. He said, well, this is what you said we were supposed to do. Arnim made the mistake of believing Bismarck.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? And so he published their correspondence to show what a moron Bismarck had been, or what a phony. And Bismarck had him convicted and sentenced to death under the Official Secrets Act.
Wow.
It was in absentia, so they never caught up with him. He ended up moving to New York, and he went to work for an Italian crime family. No. No. Although the man that your great uncle called Uncle Harry looked a lot like Harry von Arnim in the pictures I've seen.
Wow. So that's a very strong portrait that you've painted for us for Bismarck. But how does the world perceive him?
Well, as the unifier of Germany.
Mm.
And now, see that, of course, that becomes a very difficult question, because a lot depends on what you think of Germany being united in its semi-current form. I mean, one thing you'll get is a lot of people going on about, authoritarianism is inherent in the German soul, and Bismarck planted the roots of Nazi Germany, or even Luther planted the roots of Nazi. I don't believe any of that. What I do believe, however, is that by establishing Germany as a Protestant-dominated country, and by eliminating the Habsburg element, he did set Germany on a collision course with the rest of Europe. Now, the people I blame for the rise of Nazism, frankly, are Woodrow Wilson for rejecting the Hohenzollerns and the Habsburgs, and the Wittelsbachs and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, as Churchill put it, creating a power vacuum into which the Nazis crawled. But also, and even more than them, I blame the politicians of the Weimar era, who were all bloviating about drivel, where the real problems were not being addressed until the Nazis came along and addressed them. Now, obviously, their answers were worse than the questions. But when you have a morally corrupt and stupid political class yapping about nothing in particular, and somebody comes up who's willing to give answers, however insane and evil, to the questions of the mob, guess who's going to take power one day?
Right.
And whose fault's that going to be? I don't know. Could it be the corrupt and stupid political establishment? No, not them, surely.
All right. Final question.
I can't take it. It's the last, ladies and gentlemen. I can't deal. All right, what is it?
Can a person consider themselves a true conservative if they aren't monarchist?
Now, that is a very good question. And the answer, of course, as with everything else, depends on how do you define conservative. So, conservative with a small c just doesn't like change.
Right.
So, tearing down the old courthouse will bring out the conservative in me.
Right.
Not on a certain level, very few of us actually like change for its own sake. But when you're talking about, and this is how they were able to talk about conservatives in the Kremlin during the communist era, which, if you look at it in an ideological manner, is insane. But if you look at it is in a manner of personality, you might say, or habit, so that's conservative with a small c. Now, the problem with defining conservative lies squarely in the English-speaking world, and I'll tell you why.
Mm.
At the time of the Reformation, it was fairly simple. You had the Protestants breaking away, and you had the Catholics. But as is often the case, as time went by, the Reformation split into more conservative, that is to say, more Catholic-esque,
Yeah.
and more anti-Catholic, more Protestant. In other words, some people would say this far, no further. Others say, no, I want to go there. Or some of these guys, looking back, would say, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe that was a little much.
Yeah.
So, it's in these two factions, you might say, that modern European Protestantism really has its ultimate roots. In Britain, you had, of course, the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, and then the so-called Glorious Revolution, and these created the two parties that we think of today. Mind you, they're all left of Genghis Khan now, but
Yeah.
at the time. So you have the Tories, who were the supporters of, they were Catholic and Anglican, and they were the supporters of the king. And then you had the Roundheads, the Puritans, who were Republican.
Mm.
You have the Glorious Revolution. After the king is murdered, they have the Republic under Cromwell. Then he dies. There's the Restoration. The second king of the Restoration, James II, is a Catholic. He's overthrown in the so-called Glorious Revolution. And here in the English-speaking world, you have the real problem.
Mm.
Because the Glorious Revolution, so-called, was the foundation of the English establishment, of the oligarchy, the Whig oligarchy that ran Britain from that time until it morphed into something else. Now, in continental Europe, even in Protestant Europe, it was a bit different.
Mm.
The French Revolution comes along, and there's no question. Conservative means an opponent of the revolution. But, to a degree in Britain, and definitely in America, the attempt was made by people like Burke and others to show the British and American revolutions as being basically really conservative things.
Mm.
Now, they weren't. But they were ahead of their time, and they weren't as bloody as 1789. And they, just as the so-called Glorious Revolution created the British establishment, the American Revolution, or the First Civil War, established the American political establishment.
Mm.
And from that time to this, the argument has been made, as I say, that both the Glorious and American Revolutions were really conservative, and so forth. And they looked to Raymond Burke, who was a real Whig until the French Revolution, which he wrote very, very well against. So, the question then is it possible, the question before the House is it possible to be a true conservative and a monarchist? I would say no.
Is it possible to be a true conservative and a monarchist?
And not a monarchist.
And not a monarchist. Okay.
It's possible to be one with a small c.
Right.
Because, I love the institutions of my childhood, the Stars and Stripes forever, etc. But can you really be a conservative in an ideological sense? I don't really think so.
Yeah, this is a really, I feel like, an important point. I was talking about Charles before the pre-show about this, where one of my all-time favorite infographics is the one that Charles has shared and Dr. Peter Kwasniewski shared, which is, how would you describe it? The history timeline of what happened,
Different
and basically
movements.
Different movements and original conservatism, and then you had the revolutions, and then every tradition is cut off.
Yeah.
Right, and then from that you had sort of this new, fake kind of conservative and liberalism. And what I love about it is it's so hard-hitting and it's so undeniable, and people have visceral reactions to it. And I think they have it because it's so strong.
It's strong. It's so strongly against everything we as Americans are taught.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
we are taught that monarchy. Well, I mean, what did what's his face, the senile guy,
Biden?
President Biden? Yeah, when he was sitting there in that sacred space,
Yeah.
and he was going on about how in America we don't have kings, and it's all about democracy, And then, of course, his VP becomes president without so much as a by your leave from anybody who voted.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I was wondering if there's going to be a democratic function at the convention.
No. And it's a done deal. She has been anointed. Crown her with many crowns.
And these guys at the same time are keep proclaiming that they're going to protect democracy. Well, they're not really.
No, they're going to protect democracy, and J.D. Van Camp is weird.
What? What did you say? J.D. Vance?
No, Vance or Van Camp. I keep calling him that. J.D. Vance is weird.
How does that thought connect?
Well, because Kamala Harris's mouth spewed it. She said he's weird.
She's weird. There were some sentences that she has uttered, and they have her on loop as like she said it 50 times. I forgot. It's some. Don't let the something of the past. I can't even remember. But it's.
Don't let the fact that you were a mistress to the mayor of San Francisco in the past stop you from being somebody else's mistress now. No, that wasn't it.
Something.
Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that we have not, the way I generally put it to describe just party labels is that what we call liberals, the Europeans and Latin Americans call socialist, what we call conservative, they call liberals, and what they call conservative, we don't have.
Right.
And, I mean, we've got individuals like, I don't know, H.P. Lovecraft, Ralph Adams Cram, Washington Irving, who would qualify as conservatives in an ideological sense. But very few, and never as a power. But, it is what it is. It's what we've got. And as I like to say to people when they hear I don't think much of the revolution, well, you must hate your country. My answer is no. I mean, what if your father was illegitimate? Would it be any less your father?
Right. I think people who are introduced to you and are frustrated with a lot of things, and you sort of get through to them, they have that impression of you. I've watched them ask that in comments pretty continuously.
Well,
so this is an important message from you, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I served briefly in the National Guard. I love the United States above any other country on earth. Much as I love a lot of other countries. But it doesn't change the fact I don't think much of our origins. And I think that those origins have taken us ultimately to where we are now. Because through the course of our history, the various elements that kept the poisons at bay, as you might say, have one by one been destroyed. I mean, what is it that allowed us to function, basically, and function in a material sense very well? A moral consensus. The vast majority of Americans of all faiths and none thought that the same things were right and wrong. And built on that was this religion of the country.
Yeah, Judeo-Christian values.
Judeo-Christian values. And your friend Biden saying things like sitting about, in the Oval Office where Monica Lewinsky was once the Vestal Virgin. He says, sitting here in this sacred space. And during the January 6th riots in Washington, President Obama saying that they had desecrated the Capitol. Well, those are last remnants of on the other side of the religion of the country. You see, the last bits and pieces that they still have. And of course, the conservative side has a lot more.
I wonder if Biden, when he's visited the Pope, has thought to himself, I'm in this wonderful sacred space.
I wonder if he's thought.
It just,
No, maybe he's just brought in.
Yeah.
A handler.
Yeah, handler.
You're the
Gotcha.
Pope, you say.
Yeah, I see. Oh, I see. Yeah, let me handle you. Yeah, what? Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow.
Well, anyway, we don't have to worry about it much longer. We got President Kamala coming.
Really?
What?
Is that what you're gonna do? You're abandoning hope?
She's not running.
What? Excuse me?
Hope Lang, she's dead. She's not running.
Oh, Kamala is running.
That's right. Power to the morons.
Can Trump count on your vote?
Can who?
Can Trump?
You know, people have tossed it this.
I know, because you... Are you a man of your word, Charles?
Is he a man of his?
Are you really? Are you going to do that?
Well, it was pointed out to me. I could say I voted for him for 2020, and that would take care of it, wouldn't it? But I mean, his coming out against abortion, I mean, for abortion, I really can't. That's a tough one.
Is he that? I haven't been following so strongly. So that's the case, huh? That's the shot?
Yep. It's got to be for the states, and he attacked one state, I think it was North Dakota, for being too radical in their dealing with abortion. So, I mean, this is problematic.
Why did he do that? That doesn't even feel politically expedient.
I think that he's a member of his class, and I think that he follows what people like him think as a group. That's why he has no problem with gay marriage. It's the settled law of the land, says he. Just like abortion was.
Well,
I mean, you know, basically, you've got Kamala, and you've got the Trumpster.
yes.
And mind you, as a member of the American Solidarity Party, I can sort of afford to look down my nose. Exactly. You see, you're getting it. You're getting it. No, I mean, honestly, if we weren't locked into this horrible two-party system, which is nowhere in the Constitution, things might be a bit different. But basically, time after time after time, we're asked, do you want to be kicked or punched? Your choice, though. You get to choose. Do I punch you or do I kick you? Well, but you choose.
What necessitates a two-party system? I thought it was the fact that it was a winner-take-all system and that the two-party naturally is derived from that.
Well, not exactly. There's also the fact that we have the English precedent. And the party system in America really owes its origins, oddly enough, to the Federalist, anti-Federalist split over the Constitution. The anti-Federalists morphed into the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Republicans, so called, which is funny when you consider what they're like now. And then the Federalists morphed into the Federalist Party. They didn't have too far to morph.
Yeah.
And they were the opponents of the Democratic Republicans, considered vaguely conservative, vaguely the party of the educated and well-to-do, vaguely. But see, there were so many exceptions on that side. I mean, the great irony is that Andrew Jackson runs as the man of the people and has this orgy for his inauguration, right? Well, he's replaced by Martin Van Buren as vice president, who is a patrician of the New York Dutch. And his opponent, William Henry Harrison, plays the Andrew Jackson card. And he's the opposing party. Which shows you that these things didn't really mean that much.
Yeah.
I mean, people use them for propaganda. Yeah. But, you know, which was really the party of the well-heeled? Well...
Yeah.
I mean, the Democrats, you know, you think of the Solid South, how until Nixon, the South was always Democratic. But this gave you a weird coalition of Southern segregationists and drunken New English Irishmen.
I guess so.
Then the Republicans were a combination hard-working Protestant lower class people, and the country club set. So you see, these were coalitions of interests rather than ideology. But when that moral consensus I spoke of shattered in the 60s, that was the beginning of the end.
Coming over here, my mom has always got news on as we walk past her through the studio. And she had Dick Morris on, and Dick Morris was saying that part of Trump's coalition are hillbillies.
Yes.
What do you think of that? The hillbilly ideology.
The duck, what is it, the Duck Dynasty? Well, I mean, that's a certain part of the American core identity. There are others, but that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you think of the swamp Yankees in New England. You think of the Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah.
You think of the Cajuns in the Louisiana bayous and prairies, the Hispanos in northern New Mexico's rundown hills.
Yeah.
The ethnic workers once upon a time trapped in industrial towns, the Rust Belt. This is the heart of Americana.
That's true.
What's not to like? The daughters of the American Revolution and white trash.
I guess so.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing because I don't judge.
Surely.
Oh, I slapped my knee. I'm sorry.
All right, pre-show has finished.
Pre-show is over.
Yes.
Did you want more than that?
No.
Okay.
I just let you do your thing.
All right. Hang on, gang.
Full episode coming right at you.